Welcome to Unlock Your Power Splunk Basics. This is going to be a sneak peek into a new course offering by Splunk Education. It's called Introduction to Searching with Splunk. My name is Haya. I'll be your instructor for today's session. I am a technical instructor here at Splunk. I'm a member of the Splunk Education team, and I teach lots of our Splunk core courses as well as our observability cloud courses. So during our time in class today, we will walk through using the Splunk user interface. We'll become familiar with how to write searches, and that will include using keywords, using key value pairs called fields, and also how to use wildcards. Once we become familiar with running basic searches, we'll learn how to use commands and run more complex searches using transforming commands. We can use those results from our searches to create meaningful visualizations, colorful charts, pie charts, bar charts. Now, everything we cover today will be a bit of a teaser from our new education course offerings. Near the end of our session today, I'll include a link where you can download your own copy of Splunk and run these searches on your own. We'll also include additional resources for you to take these classes at Splunk Education. When you are revising this material on your own, if you're trying out keywords or running commands, just note that it is common to make mistakes. Honestly, that's the best way to learn. As you continue to use these commands and learn the syntax and the rules, they'll become more second nature as you're exposed to them. Also, if you take some of our Splunk education courses, they're designed to facilitate group learning. So we include things like knowledge checks, where an instructor will ask a question, and then you can work with other learners in your session to answer questions and even ask questions to your instructor. And it's a great way to learn from and with each other. And ultimately, our goal is to build confidence in using Splunk and writing our own searches. So that's our goal for today. Now, when it comes to the searches that we'll be running in this session, they're going to pertain to Buttercup Games. So Buttercup Games is a fictional gaming company. It's based out of San Francisco. They sell games online and in person, and they have additional offices located in Boston and London. So we'll be seeing events from those different locations. These fictional games are going to be sold in our online e-commerce store and also in third-party retail stores worldwide. So we'll be able to see products being purchased both in the online store and at the cash register in person. Now, recently, Buttercup Games opened up some cafes where they're not only selling bakery items and coffee, but also the ability to game in store. So when we're taking a look at some of our results being retrieved, we might see events related to this new store. Now, when it comes to using Splunk, we have different platform options. For today's class, we're going to be using Splunk Enterprise, where both Splunk is installed and administered on-prem. We also offer Splunk Cloud as well. It is offered as a SaaS solution, so software as a service. And then we give you the ability to access Splunk Cloud with Splunk Web. Now, even though my examples today will be using Splunk Enterprise, whether you're using Splunk Cloud or Splunk Enterprise, you should be able to follow along in your own environments. So let's go ahead and get logged into Splunk Web. We're going to use a web browser to navigate to our instance and then use a username and password that's been provided. So I'll go ahead and navigate to my Splunk instance. So my username is admin. I'll go ahead and type in my password. And I'm now logged in. So when you log into your instance for the very first time, on your left-hand side, you'll see an apps panel, and this will show all of the applications that your user account has access to. For today's session, we're mostly going to be searching in relation to Buttercup Games Cafe. So both the products that are being sold from a food perspective and also the gaming products. But we have several apps that are available to us here. We can also set up a custom dashboard, configure bookmarks, see searches that have recently been run, and also any pages that have been viewed. So you can certainly customize this homepage if you'd like to. Now, regardless of where you are in the product, you'll always see the Splunk bar. And the Splunk bar is going to be at the top of your web page. It will include an icon for Splunk Enterprise. And depending on how you've configured your user account, it will always navigate back to either the home page or a default application that you have specified. You can also easily change between applications by using the Apps drop-down menu. If you click on your user account, you have the ability to adjust your account name as it's visible in the platform. You can adjust your user preferences and also log out. You can use the Splunk bar to access any messages you've received. You can use these settings to access different configuration pages, for example, for your knowledge objects, view recent activity, and also access help documentation. The help section also includes a what's new section. So if you're curious about what's been introduced into the product since you've last logged in, you can definitely check out what's new and also view product documentation and access support from this drop-down menu. Now, if you click on your user account name, you can adjust the settings for how your name is being presented and your preferences. This can include things like your time zone and also whether or not you'd like to include search auto format. So I'll go ahead and click on my user account, which is admin. And first I'll adjust my account name. To do that, I'll click on account settings and I can adjust the name that's being displayed to me. I'm going to go ahead and change it to my name. And I could also adjust my password and email address here in this window. For now, go ahead and click Save. And even though my settings have been saved, you'll notice my name hasn't adjusted. Sometimes you'll need to refresh your browser in order to see that change reflected. So I'll go ahead and refresh my browser tab here, and you'll notice my name has now been adjusted. If I click on my username once more and click on Preferences, I can set things like my time zone and my default application. For today's session, we're going to be using Store Ops, but if you prefer to keep the default home page when you first log in, you can select Home as well. We also give you the ability to choose between light and dark mode or have it automatically change based off of your system time. If you click on SPL Editor, this is where we can adjust settings in terms of your searches. We recommend keeping the search assistant toggled on. And if you toggle on line numbers, what that will do is show numbers next to each line of your search. When you typically write a search and line numbers is toggled off, everything will be included in a single line. And this can mean that your search string can look really long and you may have to scroll your cursor right and left to see the entire search. By having line numbers, you'll be able to easily identify different searches that are being run. With search auto format, if you include a pipe, it will automatically take you to a new line. It will also color your commands, functions, arguments in different colors so you can easily identify different elements of your search. So to apply those changes, we'll click Apply. And now that my default application is Store Ops, when I click on Splunk Enterprise, I'm taken to my Store Ops application and I'm able to see that icon in the top right-hand corner. So let's talk about creating our searches. So what is a search? A search is a query that retrieves and analyzes data using search processing language. So in class, you might see the abbreviation SPL. Search processing language is Splunk's original query language. It was designed for searching and manipulating our data. So you'll be learning about the different elements that make up SPL today. When we are writing our searches, we are going to be writing them to retrieve events that are stored in different indexes. With our indexes, they typically have some sort of theme. For today's session, since we're working at Buttercup Games Cafe, we've got indexes for purchases made at the store. We've got indexes for network activity from both our customers and our employees, security logs in relation to who's badging into the building, what access points are there, and then also logs about the games themselves. And so depending on the context, we can retrieve different indexes or different events from different indexes. Inside of our search queries, we'll include keywords. We'll learn how to search on fields, which are key value pairs. And we'll also be able to include conditions as well. For example, maybe we only want to see items that sold over a price of $20. Now, as you become more familiar with searching, you can make your searches really complex. So you can include different commands. We'll cover a couple of commands today. If you take our introduction to searching with Splunk course, it will have several commands covered in a lot more detail, and you can use those as you see fit. We'll learn how to add in additional filters, and you can get really complex in terms of your time ranges. For example, if you'd like to include a specific time range rounded down to the top of the hour, those are things you can do with your searches. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we are making them as specific as possible to identify trends in our data. Now, as we begin to write out our searches, we have two types of searches we can run. We can either have event searches or transforming searches. Event searches are searches that are there to retrieve events. These are going to be events that are either stored in a single index, for example, our Buttercup Games Cafe index, or across multiple indexes. Usually when you're running an event search, it's more exploratory. You're wanting to see all of the events within that time range and the filters you have set. With transforming searches, these are searches that are going to perform some type of statistical calculation against your set of results. What I like to describe these as is a bird's eye view. So now we're not just looking at one individual event in our result set, but instead we're trying to identify trends over several events that have occurred. Now, I'm not going to go into the syntax on this slide just yet, but this is a teaser on what's to come. Time chart is a command covered in our introduction to searching with Splunk course. But from what we can intuitively guess from the terminology on this slide here is that we've got a count function. And so with that count, it's going to count the number of events that have occurred. And we can see that this command starts with time. So we're trying to see how many events have occurred over time per arcade ID. Now, this is a more complex search, but the idea here is that we're no longer concerned with just one event or looking at a list of events, and instead we're performing statistical calculations to identify big picture trends. So let's get started with running some searches. So when we're searching with keywords, we are going to be using terminology that appears in those events. What's nice is values and keywords are case insensitive, meaning as long as you type out the keyword and it's spelled correctly, whether it's in lowercase or uppercase, it will not affect our ability to retrieve those events. Now, if you include multiple keywords in your search, Splunk is going to try to make sure that all of those values are met in order for us to show you the events. So if you're not seeing any events displayed, this could mean that maybe some of the events only have two of the three keywords that you included. We'll come back to this concept of wildcards in just a moment. Let's take a look at some of the keywords in our events. So what I'm going to do is go back to my live environment and let's take a look at events related to tablets. So what I'm going to do is type in the word tablet. That's our keyword, and let's see what's returned. So when I enter in a keyword into my search, since I did toggle on line numbers, you'll notice that I see a number 1 listed here, and my keyword is in black. So anytime I'm including keywords as part of my search, they'll be in this black text. When I take a look at my results, I can see that I had 947 events returned, and each of these events is being displayed in reverse chronological order. Since I searched for a keyword of tablet, I can see in each of my events the word tablet is highlighted as well. And so I can see that certain users were trying to connect to the cafe Wi-Fi, and they were doing that using a tablet. Now, keywords are case insensitive. So if I had tried using a capital tablet, I still see results returned even though in my events tablet is with a lowercase t, but I searched with an uppercase T. Now, you can also use wildcards with keywords in order to display any variation of the term. We're going to go into wildcards in an upcoming slide. So again, you can use any word or phrase to find events where it appears in the raw data. In these screen captures here, we were searching for a keyword of Gouda, and we can see in one of our events, one of the items that was purchased was Holy Gouda Muffin. And so if we match on that keyword anywhere in the event, we will return it as a result. Now we have the ability to use wildcards as well. This allows us to match on multiple terms and characters. If we take a look at this slide here, it says searching for FAIL asterisks returns several values. And so what's happening here is we are matching on the letters F, A, I, and L. And because keywords are case insensitive, it doesn't matter, for example, whether this F is uppercase or lowercase. Now, after we match on these 4 characters for fail, it's followed by a wildcard. So what that means is if there are no values present after FAIL, it's not a problem. But if there are characters present, we'll match on those as well. So that includes values like failed with a lowercase f, failed with an uppercase f. Pretty much any characters that follow that letter L will match on. And this applies to any capitalization options because, again, we're case insensitive when it comes to keywords. So here we have a knowledge check question for you. Our question asks, what does the wildcard do when used in a Splunk search query? I'll give you a moment to read through the answer choices. Go ahead and pick the one you think fits best, and then we'll talk about the answer together. All right, so let's go through our answers. So with answer choice A, it's incorrect because it states returns only exact matches of the search term. But this isn't true. We could match, for example, on fail or failed. If we're using the example we discussed previously, we can match on any of the letters and then anything that follows after the asterisk. With answer choices B and D, both are indicating cases. Answer choice B states matches only lowercase variations of the term, and answer choice D says filters out terms with capital letters. Remember that keywords are case insensitive. So when it comes to using our wildcard, we can match on the characters regardless of the casing. And that's exactly what answer choice C states, match an unlimited number of characters in a string regardless of the capitalization. So when we ran our search, we were retrieving matching events. Now, as we saw with my example, I was searching on tablet, and I was able to see the term tablet highlighted in each of my results. We also saw that my results were being returned in this reverse chronological order. So this search that I ran at 429 was the most recent search, and so it's listed first, and then any other historical events are sorted in that reverse chronological order. Now, when we want to investigate what fields are in an event, for example, or what default fields are present, we can expand that event to see exactly what values are contained inside, and it makes it a little easier for us to read. To expand an event, what I'll do is click on this arrow that I have highlighted, and I'm able to see extracted fields. So I'm able to see, for example, my device field contains a value of tablet, and I'm also able to see some of my default fields as well. Like this event, for example, belongs to the BCG Cafe index. I can also see default fields of host, source, and source type, which we'll talk about in more detail in the deck. So on our search results page, we were able to see where we can run our search. We were able to see our results listed. We have the ability to choose our time range and also see fields that commonly exist within our results. So if we take a look at our fields sidebar to the left-hand side, our interesting fields section is going to contain fields that appear in more than 20% of our events. And if I click on that field name, I'm able to see those common values, how frequently they're appearing, and what percentage they make up of my results. Now, if I'd like to see additional fields being displayed, I can click on the All Fields button and adjust my coverage. If I want to adjust my time range for my search, I can also use this time range picker to adjust the time range. Right now it's set to the last 24 hours, but you'll notice we have several preset options available for you, and you can also include your own time ranges as well. So with our time range picker, you can control the amount of time we are spanning to bring back results. Our best practice is if you want to improve the optimization or performance of your search, time is the most effective filter. If there's anything you can do to make your search appear faster, change the time range. It's a lot easier for us to look through the last 24 hours worth of data compared to the last week or the last month's worth of data. So only specify the time range for which you intend to see those results. We don't want to retrieve extra events from an earlier time range if we're not going to use them. That's going to use extra processing time and power. So I've mentioned fields a few times, and we've seen fields in the product when looking at our interesting fields sidebar to the left-hand side. And I also mentioned that device, for example, is a field with the value of tablet. So what is a field? Fields are searchable key value pairs in your event data. So every field is going to have a field name. We refer to this as the key, and it can have a corresponding value. Now, the values might change depending on the event you are looking at. If we take a look at our gray rectangle on this slide here, we can see a key value pair with the key being severity. So this would be our field name. And in this particular event, our value is error. Now, it might be error in this particular event, but it's possible in another event we receive when we're looking at another application log file, our severity is just a warning. So the value might change depending on the event, but we can see what our different values look like for this severity field. Similarly, we have a message field, and the value again might change depending on the context of the event. In this case, we can see our connection timed out while attempting to connect to our database. Now, some fields are automatically extracted for us. These are called default fields. These include underbar time, which is our timestamp for when the event occurred, underbar raw, which is the entire event as a single string in one field. And then we have some additional default fields that we'll cover in more detail. So of this list here, these four fields are the most commonly used default fields. Host is going to include the host name or the entity from which the data is generated. If we take a look at this screen capture here, our host name is an IP address. The source is going to let us know the path or the file name from which this event came from. So in this case, we can see that this event came from a Wi-Fi log, and our source type is going to let us know what kind of data is contained in this event. Um, for BCG cafes, some of our events might be online data, which might have a different structure from events that are produced through retail devices in the store. And so the source type identifies and categorizes that structure of the event. And so in this case, we can see our source type is Wi-Fi. Underbar time, again, is going to include the timestamp at which the event is occurring. It will be shown to us in a user-friendly format, but it's actually stored as a Unix timestamp. So those four fields that we discussed, as well as the other default fields on the slides, are automatically extracted for us before we run any of our searches. So we have access to those fields. Now, in addition to those fields, Splunk Enterprise will automatically extract additional fields from your events. It's going to look for obvious key value pairs. So these might be just based off of the source type. For example, if you're working with web access data and there's a value of 200, Splunk knows you're working with web access data, so it'll automatically extract that for you in a status field. Or it may look for equal signs where it looks like a key followed by some sort of value. It'll go ahead and extract those as fields as well. Now, if those fields aren't being extracted for you, we definitely have tools you can use to bring in additional fields that you'd like to view. We have a field extractor tool that can set up knowledge objects to automatically extract those fields for you. You can include those configurations in our config files, and you can even use a command called rex to use regular expression patterns to extract directly from your results at search time. So if you're not seeing them extracted by default, there are definitely methods you can use to automate that extraction process and make sure you're extracting the fields you're interested in. Now, we don't have time to go through that today, but things like the field extractor tool are included in our new coursework, and the configuration files are included in our system and data admin courses. Now, when you're running your searches, we do want to be mindful of our syntax. If you have any spaces or any special characters, we want to make sure that we surround them with double quotes. Now, if we take a look at line 2 here, we're looking at a field called action with a value of purchase. No spaces, no special characters, no problems. We don't need double quotes. But if we take a look at this first search string here, where we're looking for an item name, we can see this smoothie is called Princess Apple Smoothie. Now, if we don't include quotation marks, what would happen is Splunk would search for an item name called Princess, and then it would separately look for keywords of apple and smoothie. And that would result in us not seeing any results. So if we want the full product name, because there are spaces here, we do need to make sure that we surround it with double quotes. And this applies to our keyword searches as well as when we start using commands later on in our session. Now, again, if you're interested in seeing your fields in the events that you're retrieving, you can always check out the fields sidebar. Our default fields will be in the selected fields section. Any fields that appear in the top 20% of your results will be in this interesting fields section, and you can always adjust what fields you're seeing by clicking on all fields. Now, when we're running our searches, another one of our best practices is to always search on the index that contains the events you're interested in. Searching across multiple indexes can be very time consuming. And just requires more processing power. So if we know we're looking for example, a medium roast drip coffee, a better search would be to include both index equals BCG cafe to only look at our cafe index, because why look at the security index and the network index if we're concerned with products being sold in the cafe? Here are some of our other best practices as well. If you're including an IP address, just note that Splunk does recognize IP addresses and it does recognize subnets. So you'll just want to make sure you surround them with double quotes. We also support the use of asterisks when it comes to your IP addresses. If you're aware of a value being inside of a field, we recommend searching for that field name and value as opposed to just a keyword. So here, for example, we can see the area code and status fields both include a value of 404. If I search for 404, I'm going to get both addresses and web access data for that HTTP status code. If I know I'm only interested in looking at what's going on with online sales and making sure they're successful, a much better search would be to just search for status equal to 404 to make sure I'm not also bringing back those area code events as well. It's important to note that our field names are going to be case sensitive, but the values are not case sensitive. And then if you're going to use a wildcard and you have some sort of string, we can definitely match on them. Just make sure you place the wildcard near the end of that value so that we aren't bringing back additional results we're not trying to match on. Now we also have the ability to use operators. So we have operators that include the equal sign, not equals, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. So if you're working with fields that contain numbers, and you can double check if a field contains a number by taking a look at our interesting fields sidebar, any fields that contain numbers are going to include this pound symbol. Any fields that contain strings are going to contain this letter A. So if I take a look at my year, for example, that's a numeric value, and I can see it has a pound symbol. So I could look for events, for example, that happened prior to 2025. Now, I'm not going to run that search just because we would be looking back over a year's worth of data. That would take quite some time. But the idea here is that we have the ability to use our filters with operators, especially on numeric values. Now, when it comes to case sensitivity, we do want to be careful. The names of the fields are always going to be case sensitive. So we have to spell and use the correct casing for the field name. However, for the value we produce, in this case BCG Cafe, is generally case insensitive. So whether we use uppercase, lowercase, or some combination of the two, it's not a problem. The exception to this includes the where command, the regex command, and the eval command. So let's take a look at results in our BCG Cafe index. Now, index is spelled with a lowercase I. So if we take a look at our index field here, we can see that it's lowercase index. So if I search for index equals BCG Cafe, I see results. If I change this to an uppercase index, you'll notice no results are returned. And so I have to make sure that I'm spelling the name of the field exactly as it appears in my results. Now, if I modify the value of the field, generally, again, that's case insensitive. So if I use a capital BCG Cafe, even though in my result sets it's lowercase, it's not a problem. It still matches. So when we run our searches, so far we've been using keywords. Another way we can describe keywords are search terms. In addition to those keywords or search terms, we can include commands, functions, arguments, clauses, and options. Now, in these next few slides here, because this is a teaser for our introduction to searching class, I'm going to go through a few commands and also some of those options. But I would definitely encourage you to take our trainings to get access to additional commands and learn all about the functions, arguments, and options that you can include with those commands to make your searches even more complex. So far we've been using keywords as our search terms. We could also use phrases. Phrases are just keywords that are surrounded with double quotes, and Booleans are going to include operators like and, not, and or. And all of these are used to just filter down what events we're going to retrieve from our indexes. Now, since we toggled on search auto format, our search terms are going to appear in black. And so these can include keywords, for example, like just error, I had searched on tablet, or we can include field value pairs like status with a value of 404. Now, this is new. We're also going to learn how to include commands. Commands can do a number of different things. They're going to take input from the events we've retrieved and manipulate them, whether we are renaming fields, which is what we'll be doing today. We can format the output. Maybe we want all of our results to be in lowercase. Maybe we want to calculate some statistics. So if we're selling different products, we want to see the total amount of revenue for the past day. We can do that using commands, and we can also create meaningful charts and visualizations from the results of our commands. Now, the way we're going to be using commands is with a vertical pipe character. Typically on your keyboard, it's going to be under your delete key or above your return key. Now, if you have search auto format toggled on, so if I go back to my preferences, click on SPL editor, you'll notice I have search auto format toggled on here. Just for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to toggle it off, and I'm going to type in a vertical pipe. You'll notice that when I'm piping these results into whatever command I include here, I'm on the same line, and this can be a little bit difficult to read. But if I go back to my preferences, click on SPL editor and toggle that search auto format back on, now when I type in a vertical pipe, I'm automatically taken to a new line. It's not going to affect the functionality in any way, but it just makes it a little easier to read. And then also our commands will change color. You'll notice it's automatically suggesting quite a few commands to me. And so whenever I mention I'm going to pipe into this command, we're literally taking the results, in this case of BCG Cafe, and piping them into whatever command I specify. So examples of commands include the stats command, the table command, and the eval command. We're going to go through the rename command and the top command today. So let's talk about the rename command. With the rename command, it's going to do exactly that. It's going to rename our field name into a new name we specify. Often at times, individuals who are involved with your implementation may not be the same users who are actually running searches in your environment. And so sometimes the field names might not be easy to guess what's contained in them. So renaming your fields can make them more intuitive, descriptive, user-friendly, especially if you're troubleshooting and you're on a time crunch, it's a little stressful. Renaming those field names in the moment can make it easier for you to continue to work with those fields. This is our syntax for the rename command. Anytime we introduce a new command in our classes, we want to give you the rules about the command before we show you some examples. Now, sometimes the syntax can look a little scary, but we'll walk through each element and we'll always give you examples so you can see how those rules are being applied. So up top, when we take a look at our command, we first see 3 ellipses. And what that's referring to is we have some sort of results that we're going to pipe into our rename command. We can't rename fields if we don't have fields. So that's what this ... is referring to. Now that could be me retrieving indexes or events from my BCG Cafe index or my security index or my network index. It doesn't matter where those results are coming from as long as I have results. From there, I have the name of my command, rename, and then I have a placeholder for the original field name. So this will be the name of the field from my results that I'm wanting to change. We then have an as clause, and then that's followed by a placeholder for our new field name. So this will be a field name that you are defining. Now, if you are creating a new field name that includes any special characters or a space, we want to make sure that it's wrapped in quotes, again, so we're getting the entirety of that field name. Now, once your field has been renamed, it's important to note that we're not going to be able to reference the old field name any further. If you have any other lines in your search string following that rename command, we have to reference the new field name. Now, this rename command only exists for the context of your search. So if you clear out your search, it'll go back to the original field name. We're not modifying the underlying index where this event came from in any way. So let's, for example, take a look at this arcade ID field. Right now I can see it's lowercase arcade with a capital ID. But what if I want arcade ID to be visible to me in all caps? Well, that's where I can use my rename command. So again, I have my results from index equals BCG Cafe. I'm going to pipe my results to a new line, and I'm going to pipe these results into the rename command. So I typed in a vertical pipe, and I typed in the name of my command rename. Next, I'm going to include my original field name. So I'm going to spell it exactly as it appears in my results, arcade ID. It's prompting me with some suggestions, but I'm going to go ahead and type it out just to make sure we talk through each element. So we've got as, which is going to be our clause, and then I can rename it as arcade ID in all caps. This is my new field name. To make sure that I'm seeing results for the arcade ID field, what I'm going to do is include a filter up top just to make sure that every result contains an arcade ID. So now when I take a look at my interesting fields list, you'll notice arcade ID is now in all caps. And that's because I used my rename command to take it from arcade ID in lowercase and uppercase to all uppercase. Now this only exists for my current search. So if I navigate away from my search and I come back to my search page and decide to rerun my search, you'll notice my arcade ID field had the original casing. So using that rename command is not going to persist. It's only going to rename in the moment as I include it in my search string. Now, if I'd like to have this be automated, every time I run my search, I see an arcade ID in all caps. In that case, what you can do is create something called a field alias knowledge object, which we don't have time to cover for today, but it's definitely covered in our Splunk education offerings. And that's where you can automate some of these commands that we're looking at. The same goes, for example, extracting with regular expressions. You can automate that process using knowledge objects as well. So we saw the rename command, which allowed us to change how our field names were appearing to us. We can also use transforming commands to take our results and use statistical calculations to organize them into a table. As the slide states, it's not a streaming command, so it's not going to go through each event one by one. Instead, it's going to look at our entire results set as a whole. It's going to give us that big picture view about overall trends in our environment. So whether we're counting the number of events we have in our results, or we're looking across all of our events and saying, you know, we had 100 products sell. I want to see what the average price a customer had, or I want to see the total revenue that was collected. All of that can come from a transforming command. Now we have several transforming commands we cover in our classes. For today's class, we're going to take a look at the top command, and it's going to show us by default the top 10 results in our events. Now, this syntax looks a little more complicated than the rename command, but I promise it's not scary. First, what we have again is our three ellipses, which means we have some results that we're wanting to sort. We're then going to pipe those results into a top command, and then we can look for the values that occur most frequently across an individual field or across a combination of fields. So you can look to see, for example, what the top selling game was across multiple arcades. You can also use additional options. Anything optional is always going to be surrounded by square brackets. So we could split those results by a field, and then we can control exactly what's being displayed to us, whether or not we want to see percentage fields displayed, if we want to adjust the name of fields that are automatically created for us. Anytime we have something that's an option, if we have search auto format toggled on, it's going to be shown to us in this green color. So in our sample scenario here, we're told, let's find the top gaming products sold at the cafe over the past 7 days. So if we go back to our search, I'm going to modify our search to include a source type for just arcade data. And I'm going to look for events that occurred over the last week. So I'm going to change my time range to the last 7 days. And I can see different games are being sold like Curling 2014, World of Cheese, Fire Resistant Suit of Provolone. So I've got different events for different games that were sold. Now, if I want to see what the most popular games are, meaning they have the most events, what I'm going to do is use a top command. So I'm going to pipe these results into a top command, and I'm going to include the name of the field I'm looking at, which in this case is the game field, because the game field contains the name of the game. Now, because I haven't included any limits, by default, it's going to show me the top 10 games. So I'll go ahead and run my search. And I can see that I'm now taken to a statistics tab. I can see all of my products that were sold, how frequently they were sold, and what percentage they make up of the total results. So I can see World of Cheese, definitely Buttercup Games' most popular game. By default, it includes a count field and a percent field, but I don't have to display these fields if I don't want to. That's where some of those different syntax options we looked at earlier come into play. So for example, if I don't want to see the percent field, one of my options here is show percent equal to Boolean. And that Boolean can either be a true or a false value. So if I want to remove that percent column from view, I can type in show percent, and I can have it be equal to either true or false. It also accepts the abbreviated versions of true or false with T or F, so I'll go ahead and include F for false. I'll run my search, and you'll notice now the percent column is no longer being displayed to me. Now, under the Statistics tab, I can also format my table. For example, if I have really long results, very long strings, I can wrap them. I can include row numbers. I can choose if I'm clicking on the row of my table, whether I'd like it to select just the cell I'm clicking or the entire row. And I can data overlay additional series as well. To access this menu, I can click on the Format option. So I'll click on Format Visualization. And for example, if I toggle on row numbers, I can see those row numbers have been added to my table. Now, additionally, in clicking on the Statistics tab, I can also build visualizations off of my table. So if I click on the Visualization tab, I can see by default, I'm taken to a column chart. And so I can see World of Cheese definitely wins the top product being sold, at least over the last week. But I have other visualization options I can choose from as well. I could make this a bar chart. I could make this a pie chart. Now, some of these visualization options are available to me, but they may not be appropriate. Because I'm looking at different types of products being sold, using something like a filler gauge may not be appropriate here. This is typically used if we're trying to reach some sort of fundraising goal or if we're trying to reach some sort of total. If my data included fields in relation to locations, whether it's on a geographic map or an office map or an election map, a choropleth map option might be more appropriate. But here, because we're concerned with counts and distributions between the products, I really like using this pie chart because I can see World of Cheese definitely dominates in terms of popular products being sold. And so that is it for our material today. We were able to walk through how to write our searches, what our syntax rules are for those searches. We were able to see a few commands and see that we were able to build off visualizations off of those commands as well. Now, this session was definitely a teaser. So if you would like to play around with Splunk, try out some of these searches on your own, I highly encourage you scan this QR code on my screen here. It will take you to the Splunk free trials and downloads page, and from there you can download your own instance of Splunk, and it will include a tutorial on how to import in sample data. That way you can try out all of the searches that I presented today. It is a free trial, so you have nothing to lose. I highly encourage you to check out that website and download Splunk if you can. And I'd also encourage you to register for some of our training courses. So I teach several of our courses at Splunk. I'd love to see you in one of my classes. You can check out this QR code here on our screen here. It shows all of our Splunk education offerings and certification exams. The content we cover today is covered on the Splunk core user and power user exams. So our courses are a great way to prep for those certifications. But thank you so much, and I hope to see you at Splunk Education soon.